Hello and welcome back to Create+Activate. I'm Adam.
And I'm John, and today's episode's a little bit different. We've had Marcell Edwards in the office all day talking everything diversity, equity and inclusion. And we thought what a great idea it'd be to get him on the podcast.
Rather than myself and John hosting the chat with Marcel, we thought it would be good to invite Kerrie, who's our head of HR, as well as Elliot, one of our senior account executives, and also DEI panel member, to have a chat with Marcel. And before we invite them into the studio, this is everything you've got to look forward to.
Look at your people. Use the data of your people.
Yeah.
What is the makeup of your organization?
Right.
Don't perceive to know. Don't just look at a CV and a person for a pound sign. Look at them for what they can bring and add to the culture and the environment and the actual company. You've got to do the training. You've got to be willing enough to open your mindset and not become fixed. And you've got to be of that growth mindset perspective.
Hello, Marcel. Welcome. Thank you for coming in today. We've had a really busy day so far, and now we're obviously sat on the sofa doing our podcast. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've done today for us?
Absolutely. First, thanks for having me. I think it's been an amazing day so far. We've got plenty of the day left, but I came in to help support the first element of your DE&I panel, your employee resource group, and what an amazing environment to be able to do that in. I didn't even know you guys were here, and it's fantastic. It's an amazing office. I'm lucky to be here, and then to deliver a sort of introduction into diversity, equity, inclusion as well. So what that could mean for Trunk BBI has been really engaging, thought-provoking, challenging, good questions as well. So having to deliver that with your employees has been really nice.
I think what I was going to say was the guys here, the reason why we've overrun time-wise is because the people are so engaged in the topic that, we overran in our lunch and learn. So, we have gone on a bit. But do you want to tell us a bit about your background and where you've come from and how it is that you've found yourself in this position where you're going out to companies and giving advice on diversity, equity and inclusion?
Well, now you're asking for the long story, right?
Yeah.
You're asking for the in-depth exclusive. So I guess my journey is not necessarily unique, but hasn't always been rosy. I grew up in a single parent family. Mum's white, dad was black. Never met my dad, so never got to have a relationship with him. Grew up in a very multicultural environment, lots of different ethnicities, and didn't really knew the importance of being different, if that makes sense, because you was never really treated differently. I never really saw any of that until I was 9 years old, and then at that point, that's where my life turned upside down a little bit. Mum went into prison, which meant that I had to go into a care environment. And I left the multicultural environment and went into an all-white community where I was the only one, so the only one that was different. So my voice had to change. I was being stereotyped, discriminated against in fights, because of the way I spoke, the way I ate, the way I acted, the way I looked. I had to change my hair color, not my hair color, sorry, my haircut, the way I spoke. Because I think this accent that you got from me today is manufactured from those experiences. Having to drop the typical slang or the language that I was brought up using, which was more sort of patois, but kind of just, I would say, just regular. So when I go out and speak to my friends of different backgrounds, I speak different to this, but I still maintain this accent because to me, this is the most comfortable accent in and around unfamiliar people to sound more articulate and be more accepted, widely accepted. So even now, so today, you hear people say aren't you very articulate? Don't you speak well? I'm like, well, yes, but it's come through many years of trying to speak well. So that was obviously a challenging period of my life, going through all that adjustment and change. And then Mum comes out of prison when I was in year 7. And so a few years later, we moved to another all-white community. So again, you have to go through it all again to restart. But at that point, I'm a little bit older, but so I've experienced it. I'm ready. I'm sort of, adapted or molded into this sort of white community to some degree, and then I have to go through school, so that's sort of high school, secondary, so that's where you kind of start to mold and learn about yourself a little bit more. But education wasn't ever one that was a home for me, if that makes sense. Like, I wasn't academic. I wasn't given a sort of prospectus of you could be a lawyer or you could be a doctor or you're going to be a judge or anything like this in your career progression, because I didn't have that role model in front of me. I didn't have the father that I never met, so I never knew what he did. I just heard that he was down south somewhere. And my mum, obviously having her background, she was more get a trade, become an electrician, become a joiner, and then you'll always be sound. They've always got work, they've always got money. But I didn't really want to do that, and I think why I do the work I do now is because somewhere inside me I always wanted to help people. So I had the ambition to become a fireman. So school for me was just like a stopgap that I knew I needed to get GCSEs. And then I knew I needed to stay another 2 years until I was 18 to become in the fire brigade. So I knew I had to stay on the right side of the law, for one, because if you've got a criminal record, you can't become a fireman. That was my perception. I don't know whether that's a reality. So I still don't know to this day if that's a reality. But I knew you needed some form of GCSEs. So I coasted through school, disrupted through school, played a lot of sports through school, just got by. Managed to get some GCSEs and A-levels because I apparently am quite intelligent when I apply my mind to it. But then again, at sixth form, my life changed again, because most of the time through school, the teachers were more like, some of them, you're not going to achieve much. Some of them knew my background. I was a bit disruptive. Some of them didn't want to work with me as much. So, I got suspended one time in school for a racial incident, and I got more time than the other kids. And I never really reflected on that until I got a little bit older. But those are the type of situations, and being sent out of classrooms or being put in the lower grade sets. Remember you got sets in school, and I was always put in the lower classes. Partly my fault, because I was a bit disruptive, but also just because nobody really gave me the attention. But sixth form, that changed. So I did some A-levels. And again, I just wanted to get to 18. I just wanted to get out and be a fireman and help people. And there was a teacher, Miss Wood, and I've referenced her a few times in my story, and we've since communicated years after. But she once said to me, like, you're at a point now where you can make a decision. And you can go to university. You've got the A-levels. You can go to uni. Never had that in my mind at all. But she was like, you play a good level of football. What if you get injured? You need a backup. Well, just go and get a backup. And I was like, makes a lot of sense. Mentioned it to my mum. Mum is like, oh, you going to uni? Like, they've got a first one in the family. Like, I'm so proud, all this kind of stuff. My mum was always one of my biggest advocates. Although she never had the best in life, and the best career and all this stuff because of her mistakes. She never replicated the mistakes, which was fantastic. But because she never had the best, she wanted the best for me. And when I came back with GCSEs and when I came back with A-levels, she was just so proud. And although she knew I wanted to be a fireman, she was so supportive when I went to uni. So that became then the focus. So I did. I took that leap, took a gap year because I had no UCAS planned or anything like that. Went to uni. Spent 4 years at uni. First year doing criminology. Hated it because, as I mentioned, I'm not an academic. So I did criminology, and it was all theoretical, like Freud and stuff. And
theories.
Going into those lectures, and I was just like, oh my gosh, what have I done? So I just got to the 40% pass grade, passed that first year, and then changed course. So I did digital marketing for the next 3 years because it was a little bit more interesting, and it was just more appealing because I was a bit techie and a bit digital. So I thought this was a cool course to have. So I spent the next 3 years studying that. Again, the ambition to come out and be a fireman. But then again, another twist and turn in my story was David Cameron came into power when I graduated, and all public spending stopped. So I remember doing my dissertation, completing that, doing the exam grades, got on my results, all fine. Filled out my fireman application, had it on the kitchen table. My best friend remembers this as well because we used to live in Lever Street in Manchester, and we had it on the table ready to go. He is now very successful within the world of digital marketing. So he already had that path ironed out or wanted to go in that direction, whereas I wanted to be a fireman. When that announcement came, it crushed me because I was like, what am I going to do? and move back to this small town and do what? Like, I've got no real idea of what's next for me. I don't really want to do digital marketing. I don't really know what it's about, to be fair, because again, not academic. I just got to get the degree, and my dream's been taken off the table. So then I got into recruitment.
I was going to say recruitment.
Yeah.
And was the recruitment sector what initiated the whole focus towards diversity and inclusion? How did that come about?
So that's a funny story because it kind of did, but if I go back a couple more years when I started at uni, so when the fireman dream became like off the table, to get through uni I had to work in a sports company. So I got a job in retail in Adidas, working in the shop to pay for uni, essentially. So I worked like 20 hours a week throughout uni. And you kind of then understand a little bit about values and why they employ you, not just to sell trainers, but why you're so important to the brand. So I kind of had that instilled into me as an employee really early on. So then when you fast forward a few years, the fireman table's the fireman's role's off the table, and then you got the recruitment option. One of my best friends within recruitment at the time is like, listen, you can chat, you're a confident guy, you want to make money. I was doing like event promo and stuff, the typical uni lad stuff. He's like, you go into recruitment. Like, so I did naively because I thought it was about helping people. So going back into that mentality of being a fireman and helping people, I thought going into recruitment, I change people's lives. But this was a recruitment agency. It wasn't recruitment of what I do now as a profession. So I had millions of interviews. I remember I got rejected once because I wore earrings in an interview, which was mad. I can remember thinking, what's this about? And it's those things that you don't reflect upon at the time, but as I progressed through the recruitment agency world, that's when I first experienced corporate racism. And I think that's then what triggered my interest to get out of being in an agency and go into a company that respected me as a person, and then also gave me a focus within the skill set that I've now developed to change the lives of the people through recruitment, regardless of their background, regardless of what they look like. So it started there for me because this one agency, I remember never visiting clients, very much like, why aren't you visiting X, Y, and Z? This is why, all these kind of things. And that's when the corporate racism started for me, and a very, very systemic and hidden, not as obvious. So when I joined the Adidas group in 2015, that's when the whole instillment of DE&I and actually don't just look at a CV and a person for a pound sign. Look at them for what they can bring and add to the culture and the environment and the actual company. And ever since then, it's just grown and grown and grown. Because then I've started to lower my tolerism to discriminations, which then allowed me to open my mind a lot more to what other people perceive and what they see. And I've been like, do you know what? I can use, again, my confidence, my ability in my profession to support people.
I think, when you say you went into a business and that was your first experience of corporate racism, I think what would be really valuable for us to know, or for us to learn rather, is to, when you see something like that, or when you feel something like that, you're on the receiving end of racism. How do we, so say if we witness something happening or we experience something, how would you advise that person to address it? Because that's a really difficult thing to do. You might be feeling it or you might witness it. What can we encourage our people here at work to do? Either to call it out or to stand up for themselves in a way that isn't going to cause them problems.
It's really difficult. Like, it's so difficult, because if you are the recipient, like, your journey through life could have been so varied. Like mine, I had experienced years of it, right? Through school, through my background of moving to all white community. So I built such a tolerance to it that even when it was maybe so overt, I was that tolerant that I didn't even say anything. I remember an example where somebody should have called it out. Was when I went into the company kitchen, and it's mad now because I even laughed at it at the time, but like I remember asking somebody, one of the managers there at the time, like, do you want a brew? Do you want a coffee?
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, of course. And he's like, how do you like your coffee? And he's like I like my women.
Oh.
Wow. God.
Yeah, I'm not going to say the rest, but you can kind of picture
Yeah.
it, right? So, so then I kind of like, everybody laughed at it, but again, the tolerance was so high that you just brushed under the table.
You become desensitized to it, don't you?
Exactly.
Effectively.
But it became one of the employees there that actually stood up when I asked him the question directly, because I was just like, mate, like, why can't I go and visit people? Like, what's happening? And he just went, because you sound like this.
Yeah.
So
but
to
you
the
look
clients,
different.
Yeah.
You're white, but you look different. So the perception within this industry, where the clients that you're going and visit, it might be that they expect to see somebody white, and there might be racism in there. So we don't want to upset the apple cart because you're bringing in so much money, X, Y, and Z. But the advice I'd always give is, if you're the recipient, like, if you can, be brave and don't go like overtly aggressive. Like, that gets you nowhere. Like, honestly, the amount of times when I've been in social situations and I've been aggressive or had aggression to me, and no one wins. Simple as that. No one wins. You're all losers in that respect. But if you can challenge it with an educational outcome towards it and just go, like, a good example would be just, like, why are you saying that to me? Like, talk me through why you've just discriminated me, or why you said that. Like, talk me through why you're touching my hair. Like, why do you think that's appropriate?
Yeah.
So it's just communicating through your education, and if you are a witness to it, you might not know all the answers. If you're not trained, you might not know the answers, but be a human being.
Yeah. And if you question them, it'll make them think. Ultimately, it'll make them think about their actions and why they've actually said that in the first place. I think it brings about a shock to them almost. They'll suddenly be like, oh God, I shouldn't be saying that. That's pretty controversial and also outdated. So you almost have to bring about that shock and almost reiterate to them, why are you doing this? Do you think this is appropriate? It's not.
I think it always helps, if you're in a situation and you witness something and it makes you feel a certain way.
Yeah.
That if you go in and say, I'm feeling a bit weird about this, that you kind of own your own feelings, but put it out there that this isn't right. So rather than going in and accusing someone of doing something wrong, you're saying, this doesn't feel right to me.
There's so many. Obviously, every situation is unique and different, right? And there's one example I can share within a social situation that makes you feel awkward, right? Because in a professional environment,
you notice.
Professional environments, you're kind of around your weird work peers. So it's kind of like, do I make a scene? Do I just adapt? Do I just get on with it? In social situations, you might be around your friends, and things are different in that environment. And for years, I used to play for a football team. And I've shared this openly, but for years I was the only black player, and I would be fined every week for being black. But my tolerance was so high that I'd pay the fine. It's stupid fines for like beer money and stuff, but it was banter, right? My tolerance was so high that I never called out. I'd be fined all the time, but it was banter.
But you were always saying to justify something, refer to the facts, or you were talking about data earlier. So when you were being fined, did you feel it in yourself at that point to question?
No.
Well, somebody else has done this, but you haven't given them
I didn't, because the social situation that I was in was manifested that it was so the norm, and it was such an environment where these were my mates, and they're still my mates today, which is kind of testament to what I'm trying to say, is that I was one of them, and it was banter, right? So it wasn't until George Floyd, actually, wasn't until that moment when I reflected on this, and a lot of my tolerance dropped anyway towards that I just called it out. And I think I put a social media post about it, sharing this example, and some of the lads in that team were like, lad, do you know what, like,
you're right,
just because you're one of us, we didn't even think, and it was just, I'm so sorry, we didn't even think at the time. And I was just, because I reflected on it, I was like, I was so ignorant to allowing that to happen, that any other black player that should come into the team, it'd be like, no, we've already got one of you. Like, and I'd be like, yeah, I'm the only black guy in your team. Do you know what I mean? It was that kind of tolerism that was then making me discriminate against other people, then also me not be a positive role model to any future kids that were coming through the football club that wanted to play, because if they felt that I could be treated like that, that they could as well, you know?
Enables it to continue, doesn't
100%.
it?
And it
that's just-
normalises it. I think as soon as you
Exactly.
normalise it, it's hard to, denormalise it effectively. You're almost like allowing it, and they're just going to think, well, it's part of our banter, it's part of our culture between
100%.
each other. And if that's normalised, then it is, as I say, hard to
I think
get out of
this
that.
sort of leans towards, we're talking about unconscious bias.
Yeah.
And I was saying to you over lunch, if it's unconscious, how on earth do
Yeah.
we address it? Because
Yeah.
it's so deeply ingrained
Absolutely.
that it's like taken to be the truth.
Yeah.
So how?
You've got to check yourself, haven't you?
Check yourself.
You've got to do the training. You've got to be willing enough to open your mindset and not become fixed. And you've got to be of that growth mindset perspective that if you hear something, you see something, you do something about it, and challenge like the norms. I said it to the folks before that if you're gravitating to certain individuals, why is that? Like if I'm talking about professional gravitation here, like if you're gravitating towards one CV over another, why is that? Is it actually because their skills and experience matter, or is it because they've got the same school as you, or they're interested in football, or they've gone to the same universities, or whatever it might be? Like then once you see that, you might naturally gravitate because you're human, and then go, wait a second. I've just naturally gravitated that person, so naturally I'm already favouring them in this process. Check myself and make it completely fair. So it's always managing that. But in social situations, it becomes even harder because when they're your friends, how do you check them? So it's just being confident enough to say,
This doesn't feel
this
right.
doesn't feel right.
It's hard as well, isn't it? Because I feel like you almost want to question it. You want to question it more, but I think the more you question it, the more you can almost lose your mind over it. You can be like, well, am I wrong? That's when almost like the imposter syndrome kicks in. And it's like,
100%.
well, I think they might have an issue with me, but I could easily be incorrect.
Yeah.
So you almost just maybe push it to the side and just get on with everyday life, when in reality, there could be an issue there, but because it's so like ingrained in who they are, it's hard to call it out because it is.
Social media is social media is so powerful for good, but also so much in bad as well. And like things that happen in society, especially within D&I, you can go one way or the other. Especially when it comes to politics, or it comes on the George Floyd moment, or it comes on anything that's happening in the media today. If you put one statement out, you could have trolls and everything coming at the end of the right. But I remember some social media posts that I put out and some things that I saw friends and people and professionals and work colleagues putting out. And I just said to them, very honestly, I was like, I made a decision myself to disassociate myself from them. And I just messaged them separately and said, you know what? If these are your views and opinions, that's absolutely fine. They're not mine. And if that's the way you feel, I no longer want to be connected with you as a person. And the reaction that got, you had aggression come back at you, like, well, blah, 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 blah. Then you had some people go back, well, what do you mean? Like, why? And I don't mean, and they were like, oh, I don't mean it about you. You mean this other person looks like me, and you're calling out. So, it's social media is a fickle beast, and in my head, you can only control, or you can try and control two spheres of influence. I call them two circles, right? So that's your family and your friends. You can control who sits within that circle of control. So to a degree, so you can shape what your kids learn and what you educate within your own family and friend circle, and in your workplace to some degree. Because you can choose the employer that you work for. You can come and speak to people in HR, your work colleagues about certain things, call out discriminations. But what you can't control is the person at the end of your street, or the person on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram that's trolling or putting out all these messages. So getting engaged with that is just pointless. So that's when you start to get burnt out. And that's when you start to be feeling like, oh my God, there's so much hate in the world.
It's mentally draining.
It is mentally draining.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when you try and take that from a social environment and bring it into a work environment, and then you might have HR saying, well, so-and-so doesn't feel or look the same, they're not performing the same. It's because you've got all this burden on your shoulders that you're taking on the world on the back of your shoulders. It's too much for you. But you're not then speaking to people within your influence or control that can help and support you.
It's where you place your energy.
Absolutely.
So when you're coming into businesses, like ours, for example, are there 3 things that you might suggest? It doesn't have to be 3 things. I always say 3 things. That businesses...
That's a very trainee corporate thing.
Isn't it?
3 things. Yeah, I love that.
are there 3 things maybe that we should be doing first when we start on this, this journey of looking inwards and our diversity and our inclusivity in the way we behave?
Yeah.
I mean, what advice would you potentially give to us or other people in business who are really starting to think about it seriously, not just words on a page?
Yeah. Look at your people. Use the data of your people.
Yeah.
What is the makeup of your organization?
Right.
Don't perceive to know,
Yeah.
and don't go out and put mission statements and policies in place or action points. Don't try and create D&I targets on certain demographics or certain dimensions just off a whim. Don't go and put women's targets or race targets just because you feel that that's on trend at this point in time. Actually do a pulse survey or hold a speaking engagement in a safe space environment to understand the makeup of your people and take action off the back of that.
Right.
The second thing I'd say is be open and ready to be transparent with the questions that you're going to receive, but also with being educated. Any leaders at organizations, if you're not willing to be educated, then you're not going to be progressive. And how can people feel safe and secure in organizations if their leads and their CEOs, their MDs, whomever it may be, aren't willing to hold a conversation without fear of repercussion? So again, it can start bottom up, but it can also start top down. But if you can meet in the middle, that's when you'll create the impact. And the third thing I'd say is education. So, learn about things, ask questions, don't be afraid to ask the questions. If you're a HR professional and you're not fully adversed within DE&I, ask for advice, ask for support, reach out to externals, reach out to people, talk about it, have open and honest, transparent conversations and say, do you know what, Marcel, I know that you're black, brown, what do you actually like to be referred as? And I probably wouldn't say in that tone, but have a conversation about it, and you obviously frame it up better than that, but don't be afraid to ask the questions and learn. And
I think you've hit on a key thing that's coming through, which is everywhere, and that's fear about saying the wrong thing.
Fear.
I'm frightened of, I used the term BAME earlier, and I thought that was okay, but you'd said to me that is offensive for some people. And so there is an underlying fear in us all about having these. We want the conversations, but we're a little bit frightened to have them. So it's encouraging people to speak up without fear of being reprimanded for it, I suppose. So
it's how you set the culture within your organization. Right? Society is different because if you go and use BAME in the street, some people will be like, sound. Some people might go, Whereas if you can set your employee culture whereby you can say things and people won't be naturally offended, overtly offended, like, oh my God, you said this, etc., etc. You can hold a conversation. That's where you can learn, because BAME is a good example where it's, socially acceptable by many organizations, many different people. But for some, it's not. And it's perfectly fine. I would never be offended if you called me BAME. But I'd be like, I just don't like the terminology. Can you just call me black or brown? You know? And that's just me personally.
I suppose it's lumping lots of different
so
people,
broad.
Oh my God.
very
So
different
broad.
people
Is.
into one box
It's
to make it
literally
easier.
putting you in a box and saying, I'm going to do initiatives for people that are BAME. But then again, you disengage everybody else. And it's like, well, why are you treating us differently to anybody else that are not within that group?
It feels forced. It feels illegitimate. It feels, like the kind of thing that is just unethical. Do you know what I mean? Ultimately, it's unethical. It's the wrong thing to do.
Absolutely.
You're grouping a demographic in simply by their skin colour. And it's like...
Just because you want to call us something
that
you feel comfortable with.
It's very wrong. I'd be interested to hear who first originated the word BAME. Because if it's a white person, it's even more, it could easily be, couldn't it?
It could be. But I do know, people of colour who, and even that term, people of colour, some people don't like the term people of colour. Some people can take offence to that. And even when I say it, I'm like, oh. But I know the audience understand who I'm talking, what the people I'm talking about. And I'm sure there are people or persons of colour who support the word BAME, So again, it's just understanding the differences and uniqueness of people's perspectives and what they believe is right to what is wrong, essentially, and not being afraid to ask the question, and be humble enough to take the answers that you receive. But it's setting that culture so that people will ask you those questions.
It could even be as simple as Googling. Do you know what I mean? Like, Google is free. Ultimately, like, if you have a question that you want an immediate answer, you Google it.
We love a Google.
Understand forums, see what other people are saying. I think a lot of the time it's almost on, black people's shoulders or LGBT shoulders, like, educate people, when in reality
it's everybody.
It's everyone. Like,
100%.
you shouldn't rely on the minorities to educate you when you can do it yourself.
No, it's not. And you think of the new generations coming through, it's so prevalent now that we have these conversations. We have conversations around diversity, inclusion, mental health, sustainability, the environment. Why wouldn't you want to be having these conversations within organizations generally? Why wouldn't you want to be progressive in those conversations? Because from an employability point of view, you become much stronger in the marketplace. From a consumer point of view, if that's your target, if that's your audience, from a profitability perspective, you can actually be relevant to the audience you're actually marketing to. And then from an employee point of view, like, you're catering for everybody. So why wouldn't you want to be progressive? It makes no sense.
A decent person.
Exactly.
Simply, why wouldn't you want to be a decent person? It's as simple as that.
100%. It's like when I walked in this building today, let's be honest, I walked into this building, I had no idea what I was walking into. None. But I walked in, I didn't feel nervous, and I'm quite confident anyway, right? But I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel like when Kerrie was taking me on a bit of a tour, I didn't feel like people were at their desk going, I know everyone knew I was coming, but it wasn't like, oh, the head teacher's come in, let's not say anything. People asked some challenging questions when we did the lunch and learn, and even in the panel, right? So the fact that the employees here were comfortable enough to talk to a stranger that they've never met before is testament to the culture that's here. And if you can continue to build upon that, there can only ever be further great things ahead for Trunk BBI. And I'm not just saying that because I'm on the podcast, because it's actually true. You can feel it in here.
Yeah. There's lots of emphasis on being progressive.
You were putting up a flag
being
before.
ahead of the game.
You're struggling with the flag.
I was trying to put up the LGBT flag earlier in the office. It's got to be done. Pride Month after all.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it is a very progressive culture and company in general. I think that's why we're trying to push this further now, because we want to be the leaders within this. We want to be the people that drive change.
Genuinely.
Do you know what though? Even when you're putting that flag up, you didn't notice this, but I did a little bit of a sweep with my old eyes and ears just to see what the kind of views were like. There was no kind of hidden sniggers.
No,
there wouldn't be.
Do you know what I mean? But you do get that at some companies that claim to be progressive.
Yeah.
Oh, they're putting up one of them flags again, token moment, or they're just putting it up. Oh, you get that at some places.
I'd call it out.
You know, none of that here.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, it's a piece of fabric. It's not that deep.
Absolutely. Relax, chill out.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, no, it's up now. Lindsay, pull it up.
I think there's probably one last thing that I would say that I think would be important and that would make my presence here seem worthwhile for you. And that's the next steps in your action. Yeah. Because if I come here today and I say what I say and I deliver what I deliver, and everyone falls back into the norm and there's no progression made, not only your employees say, well, what was the point, right? But then you don't progress. So the actions, the words can mean nothing. Echo chambers are the worst places in the world. It's the actions that we all can take to drive a company forward in its progressional journey. And D&I doesn't stop. It's a train that keeps moving. It literally doesn't stop. And you can always stay educated within this subject. So continue the journey.
Okay, well, I'll be in touch.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much for coming in today and helping us focus on diversity, equity and inclusion. We've all really enjoyed it. We've had some really good feedback.
Thank you.
Where can we find you if we want to Google you or check you out?
Don't Google me, I promise. I'm gonna LinkedIn, of course, you search my name, Marcel with 2 L's. Sometimes it's spelled with 1. It's Marcel with 2 L's. Edwards, you'll find me on LinkedIn. Similarly with Instagram as well. You check out all the stuff that I get up to and all the latest talks that I deliver in the podcast that I'm involved in. So
That's one.
Cheers.
Sounds good.
No,
Cheers,
thank you.
Marcel.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.